Welcome to the Steelers Breakdown podcast featuring PennLive Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh, who is fresh from a delayed Mike Tomlin press conference because they've stepped up the practice schedule to implement solutions to that plethora of problems that we saw exposed in that ugly loss in snowy Cleveland. Or was that the snowy loss in ugly Cleveland? You decide. But anyway, that press conference seemed to hit on the litany of problems that Pittsburgh has, but it only provided Tomlin lip service to the solutions. We're going to get Nick's take on what he thinks need to be done, but let's review some of those problems. The glaring red zone inefficiency continued. We had short yardage plays that repeatedly came up short. We had a scattershot approach to the Justin Fields package that didn't seem to make a lot of sense and wasn't very effective. And we had TJ Watt kind of short-circuiting on star power on a night where Myles Garrett shined. And questions remain about the lack of impact on another Steelers star on defense, Minkah Fitzpatrick. And Tomlin did address that issue as well. And I'm leaving out that litany of coaching blunders that goes right to Tomlin's clock management and in-game decision-making. I'm probably leaving a lot of stuff out, but we're going to go to Nick right now in terms of this stepped-up practice schedule as we head in to another division tilt on the road in Ohio, this time with the Bengals. What is the pecking order of these problems, and what are some of the solutions that Tomlin said they're working on, but he refused to go into details with the press?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest issue is the offensive efficiency in the red zone. I think that is the biggest problem. Now, let's keep it real here. It's not just a red zone issue. It's a short yardage issue. I think that is maybe the better way to describe it. Yes, they've been poor in the red zone, but it's the short yardage package, right? When you get to 2nd and 1, you should fully expect to get a new set of downs. And there have been multiple times where the Steelers get to 2nd and 3, 2nd and 4, and end up turning the ball over on downs. I mean, that cannot happen. So that's an issue, and it kind of wallows right into the same thing with the red zone, where they get to the 8-yard line 1st and goal, and they have to end up kicking field goals, or there's turnovers, or whatever ends up happening. And so, Mike Tomlin did say that they're working on that. Their red zone defense, quietly over the past 3 weeks, has been pretty bad. They have not been a great red zone defense. Against the Browns, Ravens, or Commanders. They were the number 1 red zone defense going into that Commanders game. Commanders were perfect in the red zone in that game. The Ravens were 1 of 1. That wasn't, too concerning, of course. And then the Browns also converted a few times in the red zone. So that's another thing to think about. Red zone on both sides of the football, right? Can you hold them to 3? Can you score 7? And so the Steelers' red zone issues, I think, are twofold, and we talked about this a little bit after the Ravens game, but I still think their biggest issue with what they are doing right now is schematic. I don't think that Arthur Smith is dialing up great beaters in the red zone, but I also think in short yardage, I think they're getting bullied a little bit. I think it's twofold. It's part schematic in the red zone, and I think when you talk about short yardage, it's better execution, right? Can the offensive line get push? Can you kind of keep a down-to-down consistency with your offensive line? I will say it just so happened that Thursday night game, I think the offensive line played their worst game of the year, which is unfortunate. It doesn't necessarily mean that what you saw on Thursday night is going to be the standard for what's going to happen. And, it is – you look at the track record for the Steelers and Ravens coming off Steelers-Ravens games, let alone on a short week. It is not great, especially when you go into the snow, into another physical AFC North game. The Steelers looked like a team that had been through a war on the trenches 3 days before. And even though the Browns had played the Saints, right, it isn't the same as a Steelers-Ravens battle. So I do think there's some of that residual, and I think that's part of why the Steelers' offensive line struggled. But I do think that short yardage area for them in the red zone offense is their biggest issue right now. It is when you have an offense that is so boom or bust like the Steelers is, right? They still got a lot of explosive plays against the Browns. I think that maybe is going to go undersold. They didn't have a ton of down to down success, so their success rates are not going to be pretty, and all of that is not going to be super pretty. But they have been able to get explosive plays down the field, and they were able to do that against the Browns too. Van Jefferson caught a big pass. Calvin Austin had the big touchdown. George Pickens had 2 big grabs. They had a few runs here or there pop out. Freiermuth had 2 big slants early on in the game. Like, they had big plays occur offensively. The issue is when you catch a ball at the 30-yard line of the opposing team, you need to expect to be able to score 6 at that point, right? You can't be settling for field goals or turning the ball over deep into their territory. It just feels like the Steelers get one explosive play and then don't maximize the rest of the possession. So that's very important. And so Tomlin did say they went into this mini bye week and they went into the short yardage, red zone defense and offense, and they are going to change things, whether that's personnel or schematics. We'll see what happens. I think most of their issue in the red zone is when they see zone coverage in the passing game and then lack of push in the run game. So how are they going to get the run game going? I think they need to get the run game going, period, more. It's too boom or bust, right? The passing game with Russell Wilson, George Pickens, Calvin Austin, Mike Williams, all these guys, it makes sense for that to be boom or bust. The personnel itself calls for boom or bust offense. That is what Russ does well. The run game, though, needs to be sustained. The run game needs to be more successful down in and down out. I think that's important. So I would like to see some schematic changes there. As for the Steelers, I do think we are putting a recency bias a little bit too on the Browns game. That's you look at the stats for the Steelers on road games, Thursday night football. It is ugly. Tomlin, I believe, is 0-6 in divisional road games now after losing to the Browns. He's 2-9 straight up against teams on the road on Thursday night football. They are 1-5-1 since 2017 in Cleveland. Cleveland is kind of turning into a house of horrors, if you will, for them. They have not done well in Cleveland. Last time they won in Cleveland was Ben Roethlisberger's last year, 21. They won that game. That was an ugly one. I think they won that like 15-10 or something. So they have not been very good in Cleveland. Even if it's 3-8, that Browns team is better offensively than they have been all year with Jameis Winston at the helm. Their offensive numbers have gone up with Winston compared to what they had with Deshaun Watson. And so, the Steelers, I do think you don't want to put so much weight on that Browns game, but there are issues where we are seeing patterns pop up, right? The red zone issues, not maximizing your explosive plays whenever you get them, because they did get explosive plays. They outgained the Browns. I mean, they had more yards. They had more explosives overall than the Browns. The Browns had more down-to-down success on both sides of the ball, though. And I think, you talk about the pass rush completely no-showing in a game. I mean, that's the first time all season that the Steelers pass rush has just not shown up. And, there were some parts of that game plan that they just let Conklin, the right tackle, go one-on-one with Watt. Watt had a bad game. He wasn't winning. TJ Watt was not playing well in that game. That's a rare dud of a game from TJ Watt. It's like all of those circumstances just kind of came together, right? Bad game from TJ Watt. Pass rush doesn't play well, really, outside of Nick Herbig. Herbig had a really good game. He had that strip sack, obviously, late in the game that allowed the Steelers to go ahead late. But there are a lot of issues, but I think some of them are one-game issues. I think the offensive line playing its worst game. Let's not panic about that just yet. Same thing with the pass rush. The pass rush only has 25 sacks on the season, but they consistently win and create pressure and create negative plays. So I'm not too concerned about that either. But I think it's fair to be concerned about the down-to-down consistency of this offense. I think it's fair to be concerned about the red zone offense. I think all those things that we've talked about for a few weeks now, very realistic to be concerned about.
Well, I'll tell you, that is some much needed context because after that Cleveland game, there was a chronic case of twisted ankles in Pittsburgh with people just jumping off the bandwagon. I mean, it was definitely panic mode in Pittsburgh after that game. And it seems like a month ago since we last convened Tuesday following that Ravens win when the Steelers had all the momentum. And it's capped off last night with the Ravens going out to the left coast and beating the Chargers, and now they seem to have the momentum. Of course, they play a really tough Eagles team and Saquon Barkley. But the one issue that I'm hearing a lot of talk about, especially in what was working in that Cleveland game, is why didn't Jaylen Warren get more work? And we need to see him more, and maybe he's part of the answer on some of the short yardage and getting that running game going, like you said, when we're not converting these 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 8, and we end up going out. What's the issue with Jaylen Warren? Why isn't he getting more snaps?
Yeah, I think the Steelers view Najee Harris as the workhorse. I think that's just how they view it. I think that they think Najee Harris is the better football player. We disagree or agree with whatever. I just think that's the reality of it. I think that's how they view it, and that's why he doesn't get as much work. Now, he got more work in this game than he had basically all year. From a snap share standpoint, he ate into Najee Harris's snaps significantly in this game. And that's because he was the best running back in the game. There's no doubt about it. He was having more success. His success rate was well over 50% on rushes. Najee Harris's was below 20. So the Steelers kind of ride hot hand too. But they were down too, right? The game script for the Steelers did not kind of put them, at a certain point when the run game was just stuck in the mud and wasn't working. At some point they had to pass the ball. And even with the snow coming down and everything, it's kind of where their spark came from, to be quite honest with you. You think about how they ended up coming back in that game. It kind of ended up coming from explosive plays. The one big play, obviously, that allowed them was that big run by Justin Fields, 30 yards down the sideline. And then they ended up kind of punching it in some penalties. But then you think about, Russell Wilson hitting Calvin Austin on 3rd down. You think about his explosive play to Van Jefferson. You think about some explosive plays that happened late in the game. It was kind of the catalyst, if you will. And so, I don't know. I don't have a crazy amount of issue with how they used Jaylen Warren in this game. I think they used him a lot. I would like to see this level of usage continue. Just because I think, listen, if Najee Harris is the guy, if he's playing like he was, remember when they were going to the bye week, he had 3 straight 100-yard games. That's if he's got the hot hand, go with him. If you got Jaylen Warren, he's the hot hand, go with him. I just think that's kind of where everything comes in. So I'm not necessarily, super beleaguered by how they used these running backs. Personally, I'm much more concerned about the run scheme, how they used. There are some personnel decisions that make no sense. There is early in the game, there's a 3rd and 3 where the Steelers go empty, and the players on the field are Ben Skoranek, Michael Pruitt, Connor Hayward, I think Darnell Washington, and then I want to say it was Cordero Patterson. I just mean, what is that? Don't have Freiermuth on the field. Mm-hmm. You don't have any of your top 2 running backs on the field, and you don't have Pickens on the field. You don't even have Calvin Austin on the field. You don't even have Mike Williams on the field. Like, that's bad offense, right? I think that is where personnel discussions get in. I think Arthur Smith having this need to shoehorn guys like Pruitt and Hayward into high amounts, or that they ran the same motion with Cordero Patterson 5 different times in this game and ran the same play to Jaylen Warren 4 times. And then on the 5th time in the red zone, they flip it to Patterson. But at this point, the Browns completely expected this flip and the reverse and had a guy following him at all times. And so there were weird sequencing. I think if you want to have a bigger concern, the biggest concern coming out of Thursday's game, I thought it was that Arthur Smith called an absolutely atrocious game on the ground. I thought the passing game schematics were much better, as I think you show up in the success rate, show up in the explosive plays. But I really thought Arthur Smith, you talked about the coaching blunders, John.
Mm.
We talked about Mike Tomlin's that were in this game, but Arthur Smith had plenty of his own. I named a few examples, but throwing a fade to Cordero Patterson for the 2-point conversion, there's no way that can be your best play. Not to the third string running back. I mean, come on. There's got to be a better play than that. I thought the run game schematics were poor. You saw the backside linebackers just completely free all night, and they were completely making the tackles almost all night. There were just a lot of struggles, I think, from a schematic standpoint. I think situationally, this is where the Justin Fields package comes in. I thought they poorly kind of deployed it. I like the idea of a Justin Fields package. I think, saying that it disrupts the rhythm of the offense, like, sure, I mean, that can happen, but not if you get the plays in on time, not if you have kind of a level to it, an understanding to it of when you're going to use it, when it's going to happen. I think, for example, on that, the first two plays, Justin Fields' package was brought out. The first one was a false start. And then the second one was a 4th and 2, and they snapped the ball with 2 seconds left because half the offensive line runs off the field because they think they're going to punt the ball. So they have to come on late, and they do a really late shift, and the play is completely blown up because not only can the defense time up the snap, the blocking is not even correct. People don't know their assignments. It's a complete mess. So yeah, I know this was starting as a running back question, but from a tangent, there are so many issues, I think, with the coaching. This was an issue, the late subs. This was an issue on all three units in this game. There was a late sub in on one of the kicks where Chris Boswell's missed kick. There was a really late sub, and the protection blew up, and the snap was kind of wonky as a result because you look at it, and Kuntz kind of had to rush the snap to make sure he had the protection scheme right. There was a 4th and 1 on the first Browns touchdown drive where Isaiah Loudermilk comes onto the field with 3 seconds left on the clock. They run right in his gap, get 4 yards. I mean, come on, these things cannot happen. And then, I mentioned things like, that third down out of empty when you have that personnel on the field, or with a 2-point conversion, Cordero Patterson fade route is your go-to play call. So I think the coaching, I think the biggest takeaway I had from Thursday's game was how much the Steelers lost in the margins in coaching. I think that was the biggest reason they lost the game. I thought the players, you look at the tape, I thought the players played better than what you would think. I think, live it was ugly, but I think they played better than you would think they had. And I thought Russell Wilson in particular played much better than I thought he had. I thought the first half was rough for everybody on the offense, but I thought in the second half he overcame some really questionable play calls, some questionable process. I think, George Pickens made a few plays. So I thought the players actually overcame some very subpar coaching from the Steelers staff. And so I think that was a big reason why Tomlin started his presser today, stating that they did a mini buy, and the coaches in particular were kind of grilled and put in the classroom and what they can do schematically to get better. Because I do think coaching on the margins was a significant reason they lost the game. It was just as significant as why they won against Baltimore, right? Coaching was so good in that game, what Terrell Austin, Mike Tomlin did in that game. And then you kind of came back with Cleveland, and I thought that was a big reason why they lost.
I really like you mentioning those late subs because that goes right to coaching. With the Justin Fields package, I too think that could be a weapon. And Tomlin mentioned it at the press conference that he thinks that, gives opposing teams a problem. But you're right. The execution was terrible, which goes back to coaching. And I just thought situationally, it just seemed a little scattershot that I think it got to be a weapon, but it's got to be, it's got to be in the right situations with the right play call and the right blocking and that, and we weren't seeing that. Personnel, a lot of ire directed at Connor Hayward, like what's he doing on the field? And a lot of questions about Minkah Fitzpatrick, which Tomlin did answer, and saying basically the reason he's not having any impact on games is people aren't throwing over the middle of the field and out of respect for Minka. Is that enough of an explanation to explain why, a guy like a Minka is not having, the splash plays that we used to associate with him?
I think it is. I don't understand the ire towards Minka Fitzpatrick. I just do not get it. He's had a few plays here and there over the last few weeks. The big Terry McLaurin run after the catch. He missed the tackle, but he misses that one tackle, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about how he misses tackles. Guys, he's missed 2 tackles the entire season. That is one of them. That is, I think, a misrepresentation of something going on there. Now, the splash plays, yes, you would like to see them happen. You would like to see him get a pick, force a fumble. He hasn't had a pick since 2022. So, yeah, definitely, you would like to see that. But the entire reason the Steelers, allow the 4th least explosive plays in the NFL, they allow the least yardage to the middle of the field in the NFL this year. They've allowed the least amount of completions, 15 yards or more over the middle of the field this year. You look at all these stats, they are Minka Fitzpatrick stats. He takes away the middle of the field. And for quarterbacks, it is just harder to win to the sideline. It plays into what the Steelers do well. And so Minka Fitzpatrick has been awesome in the middle of the field, taking that away. Now, floating in the middle of the field like that, it's easier for teams to go away from him. It's easier for them to scheme things up and try and kind of get away from Minka Fitzpatrick. That is easier to do, and the Steelers have enough weak links in the secondary to attack. Joey Porter Jr. is Jekyll and Hyde at times, so you could sometimes go at him. Dante Jackson struggled in recent weeks. Whatever happens in the slot every week, Beanie Bishop's played much better recently, but still. So, you can go at different guys, but Minka Fitzpatrick has absolutely been a big part of what is going on. And a lot of the coverage busts that people put on Minka are not on him. They're on other players. And so Minka can try to be more aggressive and make plays. And the busts that are on Minka are almost always a byproduct of him trying to outsmart quarterbacks. It's trying to make that splash play. And so, he's trying, and sometimes he actually gets caught napping as a result of that. He gets caught lurching too far to one side, and then, you got a single shot to the next side. So I think Minka Fitzpatrick does need to have more impact from a splash play standpoint. I think the narrative that he is not played at a high level, though, is wrong because he literally does take away an entire part of the field. But yeah, you would like to see more splash out of him. But teams do legitimately avoid him. He's still making tackles. But I do think, Minka, if he can get back to the splash, that'll be big. We'll see if he can. But yeah, teams are legitimately avoiding him. And I don't think there's this need to be super concerned about what he's doing in the secondary. Because again, I think there are players to be far more concerned about than Minka Fitzpatrick. I just do.
The other interesting wrinkle, for the first time ever, Steeler fans are going to get an inside look at how the sausage is made for the Steelers at a time where, they come careening, spiraling out of this loss. A night, like you said, where Watt didn't do anything and Myles Garrett, showed up everybody in prime time. In the backdrop, you have Hard Knocks chronicling all this, and we're going to get the first taste of that all access treatment next Tuesday. And you mentioned the Arthur Smith game calling that was second guessed. And if you believe the sort of rumor mill, there was some sniping inside the building as well. What kind of reveal is this Hard Knocks going to provide, especially looking at this week? That like you said, it was a mini buy, and they're doing these deep dives on the red zone and looking at short yardage. How much high drama within the Steelers organization is this Hard Knocks episode premiere next week going to reveal?
Yeah, you would hope it would not be too much drama, right? You would hope it would be more introspection. We'll see. I anticipate Tomlin has his guys coached up pretty well for the cameras. That's what I'll say. I think, that you're not going to get as much juice out of the Steelers. The juice you're going to get out of the Steelers is going to be those Tomlin speeches and what Mike says in those meetings and all that. I think it's going to reveal, though, kind of how the Steelers go about a week inside the building, which I think is something we don't know as much about, right? We can theorize and Mike can tell us, but I think it'll be cool to kind of figure, see how their routine goes in those meetings, how they're structured, what they focus on, how detailed Mike Tomlin is going from player to player on the opposing team, all this stuff. And so, I'm not sure we're necessarily going to get some expose on Arthur Smith or some crazy reactions to George Pickens, going at it with Greg Newsome. We'll definitely hear about that, and I'm sure we'll see things related to that. But I'm not sure. The Steelers this year, compared to past years, have been way less dramatic. Remember how dramatic it has been the past few years, right? Like, just think back to last year with the quarterback switches and.
Right.
Like, just think about week 17 last year out of Seattle. Remember the Kenny Pickett stories and all that, and Mason Rudolph coming in to save the day. Mitch Trubisky gets benched, and there's Deontay Johnson is, going off the rails at times. George Pickens is not blocking for Jalen Warren.
Right.
Deontay is not picking up a fumble of Jalen Warren's. There's way more drama on last year's team than there is this one. There are here and there little snippets, but nothing crazy. So I think Hard Knocks is going to be fun to kind of see the personalities, behind closed doors of guys like Tomlin. It'll kind of bring to light some things that I see, when I'm in the locker room and see day to day. So I think that'll be fun. But I don't expect anything, too crazy. I think if that had been 2023, there would have been some interesting drama revealed. But right now, I think the Steelers are pretty focused and functional interior right now.
Well, Nick, we are going to turn you into a TV reviewer, so you're going to have to review that first episode. You're going to have to get your Gene Siskel, Roger Ebert hat on and give us your review of that when it comes out. I can't wait to get your take. Lastly, I guess we should talk about this Bengals game. I hear that, of all the AFC North teams, this is the hardest matchup for the Steelers historically. The Burrow and the Chase and the offense. What do you think there? Going into this game?
Yeah, this is a tough game for the Steelers. That is a 4-7 Bengals team that is much better than their 4-7 record in terms of offensive production. Their defense is absolutely atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. It is bad against the run. It's bad against the pass. The Steelers, even with their issues, should be able to score. But as we have seen, it's not necessarily a guarantee, right? Ravens had the worst pass defense in the NFL. Steelers got 6 field goals. But it feels, if you watch that Chargers game last night, it feels like the Ravens may have kind of figured out something there where, it's not great still, but it's league average now. I mean, that's a big difference. And so we'll see. Joe Burrow is playing at an MVP level. I know Mike Tomlin said MVP caliber level. He's not lying. He is playing at an extremely high level. If a few of these games had gone the other way, Joe Burrow would be in the MVP conversation. There is a crazy stat where Burrow is just getting absolutely, crushed by his defense. They are losing 1-score games at an incredibly high rate compared to most teams. Like, you watch the Sunday Night Football game where they should have won that game, and it just somehow got away from them so often. But Joe Burrow, literally in 1-score games this year, has a 78% completion percentage, 21 touchdowns, 1 interception, and an 158.3 QB rating. That's a perfect quarterback rating. These are all tops in the NFL. and they're losing these games. It is crazy to think about that. He torched the Ravens. He torched a really good Chargers defense. And they have the weaponry to go with it. It's not just Burrow making plays, right? You have Jamar Chase, you have T. Higgins now back. T. Higgins always kills the Steelers. Always kills the Steelers. It does not matter who is against them. He is going to crush them. And they didn't face Chase last year, the first game, and he still crushed them. This guy has 32 catches for 574 yards and 3 touchdowns in 6 games. He is just dominating them. He's averaging almost 100 yards per game against them. He is absolutely torching them whenever they face off. So, yeah, T. Higgins is a problem. There's no doubt about that. Jamar Chase is a problem. There's no doubt about that. Chase and Burrow are playing at a high level. And they have other guys you have to worry about. Mike Gesicki, Chase Brown out of the backfield. You look at some of the receivers that they have. Tyler Boyd's no longer there, but Jermaine Burton's a really talented rookie. Andre Yoshivas is a really fun second-year player. Their offensive line, though, has been the struggle. Burrow has been under some duress big time. I think against the Ravens, he was under pressure on 52% of his dropbacks. And against the Chargers, he was under pressure on 47% of his dropbacks. So you can get pressure against him. This offensive line has struggled. So the Steelers can definitely try and get after Burrow, but Burrow is such a great sack avoider. He's able to extend plays. He's been fantastic this year at doing all of that. So big time challenge on the offensive side of the football. Defensively, the Steelers should be able to score here, even with their issues, especially after introspection, right? After we talked about the changes they made. Well, let's see it. This should be a defense where you should be able to score here. But, when people were talking about the Steelers-Ravens game being, 34-31, 38-31, if the Steelers execute offensively, this could actually be the game where it's back and forth, yo-yo, yo-yo. The Steelers could go into the fourth quarter up 17 and still lose. Like that's the type of offensive performances and outputs you're getting from Joe Burrow in this offense right now. The Chargers were up 27-6 with about 7 minutes left in the third quarter and ended up almost losing that game. They won it in overtime. So that this offense can be high powered. They're a slow starting offense generally, though, which is interesting. The Steelers are also a notoriously slow starting offense. They are much better in the second half. So we will see kind of what they can do there. But yeah, this is going to be a really interesting game because the offense of the Bengals is high powered, but that defense has been so atrocious with just so many different things coming up that the Steelers are going to have ways to attack them. We'll see if they can take advantage of it. Even if you're a boomer bust offense, these Bengals typically will give you up the 80-yard touchdown. So we'll see kind of how that matchup goes.
Well, we know after delivering that dud in Cleveland, Watt will want a bounce-back game. And what's the latest on Highsmith? Do we get him back to add the heat on Burrow as well?
Yeah, he was out there running today on the side. Practice did not practice today, but he was out there running and looking good. And it seems like he's going to give it a go at some point this week. There's nothing 100% certain there. I think Mike Tomlin said he's leaning in on a return, and then he did participation will be our guide and everything. And Highsmith basically seemed optimistic, but they'll see how it responds. He got lucky with the low ankle. There's no fractures, not a high ankle. It's none of that. So low ankles, once they are healed, generally do heal, and he's going to be able to be back. But I do think the issue is it's his left ankle. And he rushes off that left side. If you're a left tackle, of course. And so the issue with Highsmith kind of having that left ankle is when you are turning that corner and bending, it's your left ankle that gets the pressure. So that's going to be the big question, I think, is can he do that? He might even play and just get a limited snap count. Like maybe he plays and doesn't start. Maybe it's Herbig and Highsmith rotates in. So we'll see. If it's not this week, it's definitely going to be next week. But I think it's going to be down to the buzzer here. We might have a questionable designation on Friday and a pregame workout type questionable. I think that might be where we're heading.
All right, Nick, we'll follow your reporting in PennLive and your social media accounts for all the game information leading up to kickoff on Sunday at 1 p.m. in Cincinnati. And of course, we'll be back here next Tuesday to talk the fallout on the Bengals game and that much anticipated Hard Knocks premiere on the AFC North. It's going to be really interesting and a lot of fodder for discussion and your take on the show and then the personalities. It's going to be really interesting. So be back here next Tuesday. Until then, happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and go Steelers.